it's Roger here, and I have a question for you, which is, do you deserve more? I'm actually asking this from, of all places, the mall in London, and that's Buckingham Palace down there. And there's this really interesting concept of entitlement, which is a big conversation in England. It's actually all over the world now in terms of are the wealthy entitled to their money? Are the poor entitled to more help? Social security and this whole idea that we should give everyone entitlement towards minimum wage. Entitlement. Like the royal family, are they entitled to be the royal family? There's something interesting about it where for a lot of us we feel, no, you have to earn your way. You shouldn't just be given things. And so I know for a lot of my life, I was there thinking, I'm not really entitled to anything. I have to really just kind of like get out there and kind of make it happen. And maybe you feel a little bit the same as well. Maybe you think you don't deserve more. Maybe you think other people even shouldn't deserve as much as they have, or that other people deserve more than you. Whatever your thoughts are, I had a really interesting revelation a couple of years ago. And it was when I was watching a documentary on Ayrton Senna. I'd always known Ayrton Senna, who was one of the greatest Formula One racers ever, that he was always driven. But I watched a documentary about his parents talking about when he was younger. He's died now, but in the lead up to him becoming the Formula One world champion, what was really interesting about it was that from a really early age, he would watch the TV on the world championships. He'd actually see the champions like being crowned, and he would be saying, "That's mine." That's my world championship. I've heard and seen Olympic athletes who've said the same, that they saw the gold medal and they just knew from an early age that was theirs. That's a different type of entitlement. It's entitlement which is almost like it becomes a duty. It's like that success is no longer an opportunity, it's an obligation. Because it's like, that's mine there. Now that is the difference of entitlement in terms of future entitlement, which you need to earn your way to, as opposed to one that you're born with. So actually feeling that you're entitled to the success you really want, to the extent that it's no longer just an opportunity, but comes an obligation that you must have it, is the real key thing that divides those that end up at that high level of success and those that kind of give up somewhere along the way. However, there's a different second part to it as well, which is, if you notice, like the royal family, no matter how entitled you might think they are by having been born into the royalty, they've gone through their entire lives serving. They see their life as one of service. And you see this with a lot of people. The moment they actually get the Nobel Peace Prize, the moment they become the president, the moment they actually get into a position where they can be of higher service, it becomes a duty to be of service. So there's a second element here as well, which is to what extent does what we deserve link to how we serve? And on that one, there's a bigger question, which is wealth to do about getting, or is it about giving? There's a great analogy which Buckminster Fuller gives. So what Buckminster Fuller says is he says that most of us think that something like wealth, in fact most of life, is about processional effects. Processional is like science, it's like cause and effect. It's like, if I do this, I'll get this result. And a lot of us are going through looking for strategies for our business, strategies in life, which is like, show me the steps so I can get to where I want to get to. It's like, show me steps of how I win the football game. It's kind of like, it doesn't quite work like that. You've got to know the positions, you've got to know the game plays, but then there's still going to be an element of other things happening in there as well. The way Buckminster Fuller talks about it is he says the difference is the difference of processional effects, which is cause and effect, where you can predict what's going to happen, and precessional effects, which are totally unintended, which happen at right angles to that procession. So, for example, you take the concept of a pebble dropping in a pond, right? So the processional effect is you have a pebble, it's got mass, you've got gravity, you drop it, you can calculate directly like how it's going to drop. It goes just plop down into the pond. That processional concept is one that we can predict. But we can't predict the ripples and how the ripples are going to go. It depends on how big the pond is, how deep it is, but there's going to be ripples. The pebble doesn't even know about the ripples. The ripples are at 90 degrees, and they're the ones that have a much bigger impact than that little pebble. Just like in your life, whatever line you're taking, you're having huge ripple effects on everyone around you. They're having effects on you as well. And wealth is actually around those ripple effects. It's not around the pebble. Another way to put this is Buckminster Fuller talks about a honeybee and says the duty of a honeybee, because like service is linked to duty. The duty of a honeybee is to serve the hive. But how do you go from strive to thrive? How do you get from kind of doing the work to getting up to some unintended consequences you never expected. Honeybee goes out every day thinking that its duty is to collect the honey, bring it back to the hive. Well, he goes and does that, so he thinks he's done his duty. But he notices as he's doing this, there's all these amazing flowers everywhere. He's like, what a beautiful garden. He doesn't realize he's the one who actually made those flowers happen, because he pollinated them by moving the pollen when he went from flower to flower. That was the unintended consequence of him collecting the honey. The processional effect is he's collecting honey. Just like you might have a processional effect, which is getting up and going out to basically do your duty. The precessional effect is the ripples that happen from that, which is he creates this beautiful garden. Wealth is a precessional effect. So that means that you and I don't have an entitlement to wealth, but it's a precessional effect, which is the ripples of a processional effect, which is worth. Earl Nightingale says this when he says, he said this in the Greatest Secret. In the Greatest Secret, he had this, the Strangest Secret, sorry. He did this recording, The Strangest Secret. You can kind of download it. It's a free PDF online. It's really what kind of spurred so much of the personal development movement, because he was one of the first to really just see the power of the thought and the mind to be able to shift our success levels. So it wasn't about what we're born with. It's about how we can go about co-creating our own lives. And he talked about true success, after studying all these successful people, was the ongoing unfolding of a worthy ideal. It was the ongoing pursuit of your true worth, which means that the processional effect to get to wealth is your worth. It's the only way to get wealthy is to be more worthy. Is to be someone who's actually building your worth as you go, where you do have a duty. Imagine that. Imagine if you fulfilling your fullest potential was your true duty. That was it. That was what you deserved. And from a point of view of being able to serve, when you can do that, then you can be of greatest service. And as a result of you focusing not at wealth but at worth and how you're delivering that worth, it allowed you to be able to then see the ripples come back in terms of the wealth that the world then repaid you for the service that you gave. I see everyone around me that's super successful, that's how they look at it. They say it's not about the money. It's because it's about their own personal worth. And it's not being worthy enough. It's always knowing you can be worth more and saying every day, well, how do I make that happen? Hey, look here. We are right now at Trafalgar Square. And there is Nelson's column. So I wanted to finish on a little story, which I think you could find quite interesting. Because a lot of these cars driving around here, they're busy. They know about Trafalgar Square. They may not know the full story of exactly how this square came to be. Well, let me just share a little bit about what was a really fascinating story around the Battle of Trafalgar, which is basically how Nelson's column came to be here. This was about how Nelson, who was at that point the admiral in the Navy, knew that they were totally outnumbered. This was the deciding battle, which actually created the dominance of the Royal Navy, beyond Europe. During the Napoleonic Wars, 1805 had happened, to the extent that it kind of like stopped Napoleon even thinking of invading England anymore. And it happened at a time when the Royal Navy was much smaller than the allied navies of Spain and France. And so basically there was I think about 33 ships, which were about 30,000 sailors within the allied navy, the European navy. There was 17,000, about half the number of sailors within the Royal Navy. And the way that they would normally line up for battle in these kind of epic Navy battles, you would have seen it in the movies, you would have a line, a full line, and they'd come at each other as this full line. And the reason they would do that is, one, because then they could kind of pick off the ships one by one. And the second one is you had to have these signal ships. They didn't have things like the internet and phones in those days. So what they had to do was they had to have the signal ships to signal to the ships. Should they fall back? Should they come forward? What should they do? What Nelson did, which is so amazing, was he said, this is no longer an opportunity to win a battle. This is an obligation. If we lose this one, we've lost everything. He just made it a must. And so what he did was he actually put them in a situation where there was no retreat. In fact, he didn't even put them in a situation where they were coming along in parallel. He created two columns of ships that would kind of come directly at this wall of ships, and they were going to come at full speed. This is exactly what he did. They came in at full speed, which was totally unexpected, as they were coming through with far fewer ships, and they hit and split this line into three. So you now have the Spanish and the French Navy being split into three, which means they couldn't see the signal ships anymore, and then circle around, and so like it'd be a one-on-one battle, which suddenly become 1 or 2, 1 or 3, 1 or 4. So all these ships started getting destroyed. In fact, out of 33 ships, 22 of the Allied ships were destroyed. It was 2/3 of the entire Navy, whereas Nelson didn't lose a single ship. And it's because they had this way of actually just reinforcing with an entirely different way of doing things, cutting off the head effectively because they couldn't see the signal ships anymore. And what was so fascinating was that he knew he had to have a different message for his Navy, because he couldn't just say follow the signal ships, because of course none of them could see the signal ships. So he sent out a telegram just as they started the attack. And the telegram said, England expects that every man shall do his duty. He said, look, okay, like we can't just tell them follow us. We have to tell them follow themselves. Each of you as sailors will follow your truest calling as to what you're meant to do at that moment. And that it really is the fundamental difference of something which is like a big institutional hierarchy where you're waiting for someone to tell you what to do, and a democratic like leadership system where every single person is like, I know what to do because I know what the duty is here. I know what I need to be achieving here. In fact, in that battle, Nelson died. And so this is like a memoriam to Nelson. And in the battle, some of the people that were close to him said that as he was dying, some of his final words were, thank God I did my duty. Isn't that interesting? Is that this idea that like right here at Trafalgar Square is kind of pointing to something happening all over the world today, where we can keep on waiting for other people to figure things out. We can keep on thinking other people don't deserve so much or we deserve more. And we're always thinking about the getting, but there's no limit to what you can give. There's a limit to what you can get. There's no limit to what you can give. And if you started thinking, well, what if my duty was to give, and to give at my greatest? What if what I deserve is to serve? What if my greatest entitlement is to be living at my truest, greatest potential, and to be giving at that level? Because if that was true, then your wealth is not an opportunity, it's an obligation. And it's one that comes the moment you start really focusing and asking that question, how can I be of greatest worth? First of all, to the people around me, then to my higher calling. And that's what I'd like to just share as a final word to you, that the clues are all around us. And it really is just a matter of us picking them up and then running with them. And I really hope that you'll join me in my coming videos as I get closer and closer to the launch of my book. And I really look forward to hearing about your story and your journey in the years ahead.